Having left the old world behind with our last episode, today we dive into the Frostlands and explore the canonical first scenario after the Great Freeze. Welcome to the Frostpunk lore series, where in today's episode we will discuss the fall of Winterhome. This video will be divided up into two sections, the first being all in-game / developer confirmed information, and the second being my own theories as to where the world and story may go in the future.
To whoever is out there, if anyone, know that we were here. We did our best. We, the survivors, doomed by our own mistakes, aware of the risks and the price to pay. We took our last chance. And we failed.
Site 157, aka Winterhome, is doomed. After the leader of Winterhome ignored the problem for weeks, unbearable cold and brutal repression drove the inhabitants to rise up against them. However, the leader and his forces didn't go down without a fight, and half the city was burned to the ground. With the generator hastily patched up, the first task of the new leader is to restore Winterhome and convince the people it still has a future. Beginning the scenario, we see what's left of the city. Houses, factories, and everything in between are nothing more than rubble. This scenario, compared to all the others in the game, is quite different, as for the most part, the city is practically built, and various upgrades have already been constructed. However, the main gameplay loop of this scenario is to clean up the rubble, save those trapped inside, and constantly repair the failing generator. As we learned from the last episode, one of the main reasons for this generator failing is because a large shipment of generator supplies was more than likely stolen by Site 113, aka Liverpool. Not only this, but if Site 113's construction is anything to go on, Winterhome's construction effort was extremely difficult, and towards the end, corners were cut and quality assurance went out the door. For all intents and purposes, the generator was doomed from the start. The inherent problems were then expedited by an inept leader who seemingly only cared about himself and not the quality of life for his people. While our people are repairing what's left of Winterhome, we can send scouts out to explore the surrounding areas. The first major site we can discover is a weather station manned by several engineers who use an array of instruments to monitor the air temperature, wind forces, and atmospheric pressure changes. We don't know where these guys came from, however, this does hint at the idea that not everyone is surviving because of a generator. There could be dozens, if not hundreds, of these little research outposts dotted across the land. In fact, not far from here, we can find a storm shelter with some explorers we can send back to Winterhome. Further exploring the Frostland, we can come across a dreadnought, one of the huge machines that brought the people of Britain to the generators. This is just one of many. However, after finding another one of these behemoths, we learn that after arriving in Winterhome, the inhabitants stripped the dreadnoughts of almost all usable materials, leaving them behind as nothing more than giant steel husks. We can also find the remnants of the missing third dreadnought, which apparently was destroyed after one of the boilers exploded after the pressure in the others was raised to maintain the power of the engines, causing them all to fail one by one. This is chalked up to faulty manufacturing, which was caused by a rush job and was created with substandard materials, just like the generators. Now these dreadnoughts are massive. Our scouts described approaching it as, "We feel like ants crawling over an alien landscape towards some gigantic beast." These dreadnoughts not only carried people, but also hauled supplies, as we can find an abandoned cargo trailer that carried all kinds of goods, from construction materials to coal and food rations to scout sleds and steam cores. While we don't really get a full image of what one of these dreadnoughts look like, we can look at some concept art that gives us a somewhat better idea, but I honestly think the best way to describe these things are giant land supercarrier trains, which sounds amazing, and I really wish we get a better look at these things at some point in the future. Anyway, back to Winterhome. As the rebuilding effort concludes, we uncover a few more interesting things. If we invest in the radical treatment law, we will eventually be contacted by a doctor stating, "I was a field surgeon in the Boer War and worked with the Royal Society to reduce the rate of limb loss in army hospitals." While this isn't anything unique to this scenario, this is the first time this has been mentioned, so let's discuss it. The first Boer War took place between December 1880 and March 1881. It was a conflict between the British Empire and the South African Republic, also known as the Boer Republic. The war emerged primarily due to tensions over British expansionism and the desire of the Boers to maintain their independence and sovereignty. So, usual colonialism conflicts. We don't know exactly when the fall of Winterhome takes place, but with the last autumn and the Great Freeze being in 1886, I'd assume this is probably around early 1887. So the war is still pretty fresh on people's minds. Elsewhere in the city, at the snow pits where the dead are buried, we learn that the bodies have been divided into two heaps. One lies the victims of the fire and those who attempted to pacify the riots, and the other, the charred corpses of the previous leader and his men. So this confirms that the previous leader and most of his forces are dead. We can actually find some survivors who served this previous leader who hid in the guardhouse pantry when they realized our forces were winning. But other than them, all that remains of the prior regime lays frozen in the snow pits. Once all of the rubble is cleared and the survivors are cared for, we can send our engineers to work on the failing generator. However, we quickly discover that this is a fool's errand. When the full generator report is complete, our engineers tell us that it will keep breaking down and each malfunction will cause the stress within the generator to start rising. We will be able to patch it up, but these fixes will not last for long. The generator will eventually break down permanently and then explode from rising stress. Winterhome is doomed. However, all hope is not lost. As our chief engineer will tell us, "I was thinking about the last of the dreadnoughts that brought us here, the only one we haven't taken apart yet. At first, it seemed we'd have to dismantle it to fix the generator, but now I think we may need it intact after all, just in case. We have to leave the city." And as the generator fails more and more, that becomes our only option. Preparing for evacuation, the only hope for the people of Winterhome is to evacuate as many people as possible using the dreadnought we didn't fully dismantle. We send people, resources, and everything we can to get the dreadnought up and running again. As we're doing so, the generator continually breaks down. Some of our engineers even volunteer to sacrifice their lives to prolong its survival just a little bit longer. Riots break out on the streets, people flee into the Frostlands. The end has come once again. After a handful of days of saving as many people as possible, the generator finally breaks down permanently. In a matter of hours, the stress will become critical and it will blow up. As this happens, the people left behind gather in the streets to get one last look at the heart of the city. This generator was meant to be their salvation, but in the end, it was their downfall. It is unknown how many people escaped the dreadnoughts, but many were left behind. As the generator explodes, we get one final message from the survivors. First, we saw a column of fire and smoke rise on the horizon. As a rumbling thunder shook the ground under our feet, we knew the generator was gone. And with it, every single poor soul left in Winterhome. It was too late to save them. Though our hearts were heavy with the guilt of surviving at the expense of so many others, we rode the dreadnought into the white void, gathering what was left of our society and leaving our home behind. We did not look back. We already knew the fate of Winterhome. In a developer Q&A discussing the fall of Winterhome, Kuba Stokalski would state, "The fate of the people of Winterhome is intentionally left vague, and we will have to see if we can revisit them maybe at some point. So whether or not Winterhome survived is not really the point. The point of this DLC, and pretty much the game in general, is to explore the harsh realities of survival in extreme conditions and the ethical dilemmas that arise in desperate situations. The downfall of Winterhome serves as a cautionary tale, highlighting the consequences of poor leadership, lack of foresight, and the brutal consequences of unchecked ambition. Moreover, the narrative of Winterhome underscores the themes of resilience and the human spirit's ability to preserve even in the face of overwhelming odds. Despite the tragic end, there's a small glimmer of hope in the survivors' determination to rebuild and forge ahead, albeit with very heavy hearts and the burden of their past mistakes. Do I think the people of Winterhome survived? Honestly, yeah, I do. There are other generators out there, hot springs, shelters, you name it. The people of Winterhome, more than likely, found a suitable location and started the foundations for what could be a new and thriving society. These are tough people. They basically faced the end of the world twice, if not 3 times, and still pulled through. And if this concept art of a dreadnought converted into a makeshift generator is anything to go by, I have a strong feeling we'll see these guys again in the future.